sound of metal scraping against stone echoed through the dry alleyways of Gidan Tanko, a town known for its scholars and cattle markets. Malim Jibril Musa, 42 years old, was sprinting barefoot through the dust, his breath ragged, his white kaftan torn. Behind him came a sound unlike anything he'd ever heard, a sharp rhythmic clank, like iron joints grinding with each step. He didn't dare look back. The robotic skeleton was still following. 7 feet tall, forged in the shape of a man's bones, but made of shining titanium, the creature didn't speak. It simply moved, with glowing red eyes and a right hand that pointed like the finger of death. It didn't run. It didn't rush. But no matter how fast Jibril ran, the skeleton kept pace, turning corners, stepping over fences, ignoring screaming bystanders. Allah yakiaye, someone shouted from a rooftop as they watched Jibril dart past. Don't look at it, another cried. It will point at you. Jibril ducked behind a water tank, gasping for air. He gritted his teeth, frustrated. Why me? Despairing, why is it after me? His thoughts raced. It had started with that offer 2 months ago, from a group of shadowy men who said they were scientists. They wanted his help designing a wave transmitter that could direct pulses at long range. He was suspicious. One of them, Malam Idris, he recognized from a rumored terrorist cell that once operated out of Maradi. Jibril had refused. Now he was running for his life. The skeleton's red eyes flickered through the gaps in the tank's base. Jibril didn't hesitate. He leapt from cover and ran behind the mosque, through the banana grove, and toward the riverbed. He could feel heat at his back, like static clinging to his spine. Then, short pause, nothing. Long pause, silence. He turned back once, just for a second. The skeleton had stopped. Its red eyes blinked and turned away. Back toward the town, toward his home. By the time Jibril returned, hours later, covered in mud and cuts, it was too late. Smoke rose above his compound. A child's sandal lay in the dust. He stepped inside what used to be his home. The walls were scorched, the prayer mats burned. His wife Aisha gone. His daughters, Sadia, Maryam, and Habiba, nowhere. His 6-year-old son Nazir, a small, still form under a broken bench. Jibril collapsed to his knees. A neighbor stood at the gate, trembling. It came here, the man said, tears in his eyes. It walked through the front door like it knew them. Hesitantly, it just pointed, one by one. They never screamed, just shook and died, like lightning. Choked up, Jibril couldn't speak, silent weeping. He couldn't even cry. The skeleton arrived at noon. It walked straight into the center, where onions, sugarcane, and shea butter were being traded. It pointed at an old trader, Alhaji Bako, and he dropped dead. Then it pointed at a boy carrying yams, his body lit up with electricity, jerking until he fell flat. Panic spread instantly. 32 people died before it walked out as silently as it came. By the end of the week, the skeleton struck Danbata cattle market and Shinkafi grain fair. Men said it was a jinn, a supernatural being of vengeance. Others said it was the spirit of a betrayed king. Elders met in Sokoto and called for prayers. Sufi scholars performed ruqya, Quranic healing rituals. In Zaria, Bori priestesses danced around burning pots, chanting to appease the spirits. In Jos, prophets declared it the result of ancient blood curses. Nothing worked. Even government officials were baffled. Bullets did nothing. Drones lost its signal. Cameras couldn't capture its movement. In the shadow of all this, Jibril stayed silent. He lived now in the back room of a retired herbalist inquirer, surviving on bread and salt. At night, he scribbled formulas and diagrams in an old notebook, filled with equations no one else understood. One evening, the herbalist sat by the door. "You know something about that thing, don't you?" Jibril nodded, staring at his notes. "It's not magic," he whispered. "It's not a ghost. It's a weapon, a machine. They made it look like a skeleton to make fools out of all of us." "Who are they?" "Terrorists. Maybe worse, they wanted me to help them. I said no. They used my theories anyway. The herbalist swallowed hard. But if prayer doesn't work, what do we do? Jibril didn't answer. Outside, the red dusk bled across the skies. The air was still. Markets were closing early. Streets were empty. Communities scattered. And the people, terrified, confused, waited for a supernatural savior that would never come. But Jibril knew the truth, and he would not wait. Malam Jibril ran again. The loud thunder cracked above the dark skies of Quarry as his feet pounded the sand. Behind him, the silver skeleton chased, without a sound. Its red eyes glowed in the night, and its long arms swung like a machine built for death. Jibril's breathing was heavy, his white kaftan soaked with sweat and torn from thorn bushes. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The skeleton pointed a finger at him. A beam of blue light shot past his head and struck a tree, burning it to ash instantly. Jibril ducked, rolled, and kept running. He jumped over rocks, dashed through dry farms, and slipped into a small cave he had used before. He hid behind stones, silent, holding his breath. After a few minutes, the skeleton stopped. It scanned the area, then turned back toward Quarry. Jibril had escaped again, but he knew what would come next. Just as before, the skeleton stormed into the village. The people screamed and ran. It pointed at them, one by one. Sparks flew, bodies fell. It moved slowly, not speaking, not stopping. Quarry turned into a place of sorrow that night. Even chickens and goats scattered in fear. Nothing made sense. 3 days later, it attacked another village during a naming ceremony. Then another village during market day. People fled from gatherings. Markets closed. Churches and mosques emptied. Elders stopped community meetings. Everyone feared the next strike. Soon the village elders and priests of Quarry called for a meeting at the village square. Malam Jibril was summoned. He stood before them, weak, tired and silent. His clothes were dirty, his face covered in dust. "You bring death upon us, Jibril," said Chief Ardo, the oldest elder with a grey beard and red cap. "You escaped the beast again, and it returned to kill our people. What game are you playing?" "I am not behind this," Jibril said quietly. "Then explain," barked another elder. "Why does it always come for you first?" Jibril lifted his eyes. "It is not a ghost, it is a robot, a machine, made by men. The terrorists, I told you, they built it to trick us. They want to break our communities, scare us, divide us, for power." The elders shook their heads. "You speak like a madman," a priest said. "Our oracle at the hill of Baka says you entered the shrine without cleansing. You desecrated the god's holy ground. This skeleton is your punishment, and ours, for your sin." "I never entered the shrine," Jibril replied calmly. "I was chased. I ran. I am innocent." "You lie," one of the younger priests shouted. "I only speak what I know," Jibril answered. "This is not a curse, it's a weapon, created to look like something beyond understanding, so we panic and turn against ourselves." The elders discussed among themselves for a while, then Chief Ardo stood. "You have 2 weeks, Malam Jibril. 2 weeks to stop this skeleton. If you fail, we shall sacrifice you to the gods of Baka to save our people. The gods have spoken." Jibril looked down silent. Meanwhile, the nearby villages began to accuse Quair of hiding a man who was clearly connected to the terror. One letter from the leader of Barkin Kogi arrived that night. "If you do not hand over Malam Jibril," it read, "we will cut all ties with Quair. Let him come and explain why your village is the only one the skeleton visits first." Jibril sat alone in his small hut, staring at the wall. He had lost his family, he had lost his village's trust, and now he had just 2 weeks to stop a weapon no one believed was real. What would he do next? Malam Jibril knew time was running out. 2 days after the elders gave him the 2-week ultimatum to stop the skeleton or be sacrificed to the gods, he packed a few clothes and left the village before sunrise. He could not fight this strange enemy alone. He needed help, real help. He decided to travel to Sambisa Army Base, one of the largest military bases in the northeast. He had taught science there once during a teacher's exchange program and knew a few contacts. He had nothing to lose. When he arrived at the base, dusty and tired, he asked to see Commander Ordu Ibrahim, a senior military officer who had led many successful operations against terrorists. After hours of waiting and background checks, he was finally allowed in. Commander Audu, a tall, bald man in his late 50s with a sharp face and serious eyes, listened carefully as Jibril told his story. How the terrorists had approached him to join a strange research group, how he turned them down, and how a metallic skeleton later killed his entire family and began attacking villages. "I know who some of these people are," Jibril said, his voice trembling. "I can help you find them, but I can't do it alone." The commander was silent for a moment. Then he stood up, extended his hand, and said, "Thank you for your courage, Malam Jibril. You are a brave man. We will begin a full investigation tomorrow. We will protect you and bring these criminals to justice." Jibril felt a small wave of hope rise in his heart for the first time in weeks. But that hope died the next morning. He was staying in a guest room inside the army base when a loud knock woke him. Soldiers stormed into the room with guns drawn. "Where is he?" shouted one of them. "The terrorist is here." Jibril froze. "Terrorist? Me?" They pushed past him and ransacked the room. Within minutes, someone shouted from outside, "He's been declared wanted." Jibril's heart nearly stopped. He didn't wait to hear more. He dashed through the back window and fled into the thick bush nearby. By noon, his name and face were on every radio and town announcement board. Malam Jibril, wanted for links with terrorist activities. If seen, report to the nearest security post. He couldn't believe it. The same government he went to for help had now branded him a criminal. He didn't know how. Maybe the terrorists had informants in the army. Maybe someone lied. All he knew was that both the terrorists and the soldiers were now hunting him. And his village? They were simply waiting for the 2 weeks to be over so they could sacrifice him at the Tungar Majigi shrine. Everyone was against him. Everyone. Jibril hid in the ruins of an abandoned settlement deep in the forest. He hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. At night, he barely slept. Every crack of a twig, every flutter of a bird's wing made his heart race. What if the skeleton found him again? What if the soldiers tracked him? What if the villagers delivered him to the shrine gods? One evening, as he sat under a tree with a piece of dry bread, he whispered to himself, "Who can I trust now? No one, maybe not even myself." His mind wandered back to his wife and children, the way they screamed as the skeleton pointed at them. He covered his face and wept like a child. Still, something inside him refused to give up. He was a man of science, a teacher. He knew this wasn't magic, it was a machine, made by humans. That meant it could be stopped. But how? He had no weapons, no allies, no food, no safe place to hide. He was a man alone, marked by all sides, and time was running out. "I must find a way," he muttered, "even if it's the last thing I do." As the wind howled through the trees and darkness fell over the forest, Malam Jibril wrapped himself in a torn blanket and closed his eyes. Tomorrow was another day. One step closer to his fate, or his freedom. Malam Jibril could no longer hide. He had run from the terrorists, from the army, and from his own people. But now he decided to fight back. He spent nights alone in the forest using old metal parts, wires and batteries from damaged devices he had gathered over time. He was once a local school teacher and community scientist, so he still remembered how to build simple machines. After a week, he finally created 2 important tools: the neutralizer And the tracker. The neutralizer was shaped like a large stone with a button. Inside it was a powerful magnetic pulse system. Once activated and thrown near the skeleton, it would release a short electric burst that could shut down any electronic system in the area for a few minutes, including the robot skeleton. The tracker was a small device like a tiny metal ball. Once attached to the skeleton's body, it would send out signals using old radio waves. Jibril had a receiver to pick up the signal and find the direction and distance of the skeleton at any time. He knew he couldn't do this alone. So in secret, he reached out to trusted vigilante leaders from nearby villages. He told them everything. How the skeleton was not sent by the gods, but by terrorists trying to destroy their communities for political power. At first, they didn't believe him, but when he showed them how the neutralizer worked, they were amazed. Jibril gave 3 vigilantes the neutralizers and taught them how to throw them. He gave the tracker to a skilled hunter named Bello, who would sneak close and stick it on the skeleton without being noticed. They agreed to wait and watch. 2 nights later, the skeleton came again. It walked into Danger Village, glowing red under the moonlight. It raised its finger, ready to strike. People screamed and ran, but the vigilantes stood their ground, hiding in the shadows. Bello moved quietly and quickly. He jumped out, slapped the small tracker onto the back of the skeleton, and rolled into a ditch. The skeleton turned, but before it could attack, the 3 neutralizers were thrown in its direction. All 3 devices landed around it and buzzed loudly. A flash of blue light exploded. The skeleton froze. It stopped moving completely. Its lights went off. People stared in shock. It had never stopped before. Jibril and the vigilantes didn't wait. Using the tracker, they followed the signal that was now moving slowly, as the terrorists were trying to pull the robot away. The signal led them deep into the forest, behind a hill near Tunga Rocks. That same night, armed vigilantes invaded the hideout. The terrorists were eating and laughing when the guards burst in. They were caught by surprise and didn't fight much. 10 of them were arrested. They were tied up and marched to the main road. The next morning, the community handed them over to government soldiers. News spread like fire. Malam Jibril was no longer hated. People shouted his name in the markets and sang for him in the villages. The same elders who wanted to sacrifice him now bowed before him. The army dropped all charges against him. Even the president sent a letter of praise. Later that month, the government gave him a national award for bravery. He was also offered a full-time job at the National Research and Security Center in Abuja, where he would work on advanced science to protect the country. Jibril packed his few belongings and left the village with tears in his eyes, but this time not from pain or fear. He had survived, he had fought back, and he had won. He was no longer chased by death, he had chased it away.